everyone, this is Marika and welcome back to another session of Communication and Education Technology. In our previous sessions, we have discussed about what is assessment, what are the purposes of assessment, what is the criteria that is to be followed for constructing an evaluation tool, for an evaluation tool to be called a valid evaluation tool. In order to construct and in order to make sure that the tool that we use is appropriate, there are various criteria an evaluation tool must meet. And after that session, we also discussed about scope of evaluation and the classifications of evaluation. In the classification of evaluation, we've seen that there are various types of classification. In this session, we are going to start with the first type of evaluation tool, which is used to evaluate the knowledge of the student, which is essay type question. Now again, as the term suggests, essay type questions are usually selected by the evaluators. Essay type of questions are selected by the evaluators or the educators because essay type question challenges the students create a response rather than simply selecting a response. So if we take other forms of assessment, other form of evaluation such as multiple choice question, the student only have to choose the correct answers. Whereas in essay type questions, the evaluator choose the essay type questions because it requires the student to think, it requires the students to create the response rather than simply selecting a response. Some of the educator also select essay types of question because it not only requires the students to create a response, but it requires students' ability to reason, create, analyze, synthesize, as well as evaluate. So essay type question, as we know and as the term suggests, is where the students have to elaborate the answer, right? So here the students not only create the response, they need to analyze, synthesize, evaluate, as well as create a response. So it requires a lot of work from the student side. So in order to extract that work, in order to make sure that the student has a better understanding of a particular topic, essay type questions are usually chosen by the educators. So essay type questions are selected or it is chosen by the evaluators or the educators because of the advantages it has to offer. Despite of various advantages an essay type question has to offer, it obviously comes with various disadvantages as well. As we have seen in the first session when we discussed about the criteria, which is objectivity, we have seen that in essay type question there is a chance for the evaluator to become biased, or there is a chance of subjective bias by the evaluators. Whereas if we take multiple choice questions or short answer questions, there is less chance for the evaluator to have a subjective bias. So that is one of the disadvantage of an essay question, right? So even though essay question has a lot of advantages, it also comes with disadvantages. But when we take Indian universities and colleges, essay type question is the most commonly used or most common evaluation tool that is used in most of the Indian colleges, universities, as well as in schools. Let us now see the definition of essay type questions. Essay questions or essay type of questions are defined as a test item. It is a test item which requires a response created by the examinee or created by the respondent, usually in the form of one or more sentences, which is of a nature where no single response or no single sentence can be considered as a correct pattern or as a correct response, and the accuracy and quality of the answer that is given by the student can only be judged by a skilled or an informed person. So this definition says that an essay type question is a test item. It is an evaluation tool which requires the respondent or the examinee to compose the answer. Now here the examinee is composing the answer and the answer is usually in more than one sentence. Now this answer is of such a nature that not a single answer or not a single response can be considered as a correct response. It cannot be listed out as a correct response, and the judgment and the quality and accuracy of those answers can only be judged by a skilled person. Okay, so as we all know, essay type question is a long answer format where the student have to create the answer or compose the answer. And now here, as I said, the answer is in one or more than one sentences, and there is not a proper answer that can be listed out as the only correct answer. If we see in multiple choice question, we have one correct answer. If we see fill in the blanks, we have one correct answer to fill in the blanks. Whereas in essay type question, one particular response cannot be considered as the only correct response. But now the judgment of this answers given for the essay type questions must be done by a skilled person or a person who has a good knowledge on the subject, because the responses may vary from one student to another student, from one respondent to another respondent. And essay type questions are usually to see or to understand how well the student have understood the concept, right? So even though the pattern of the answer may not be same, even though how it is being expressed may not be same, but the entire written context may have the same content. So here we need a skilled person in order to make sure that what the student or a respondent is trying to say is correct. We can also say that an essay type question is a type of test item or is a type of question that requires extended written response from the respondent or from the student. Another very interesting definition of essay type question is essay type question is a testing tool or it is a test item which contains questions requiring the respondent or the students to write, right? In essay type question, the students are supposed to write in order to express what is being asked. Now here in essay type question, it emphasizes on recalling rather than just recognizing the correct response. So as I said, in multiple choice question and all, we have many options given and we just have to select the right one. Whereas in essay type of question, the students have to recall the information, the facts and the knowledge that they have learned, they have possessed and write it down. So it emphasizes on recalling rather than simply recognizing the correct response. Now that we know what is an essay type question, let us see what are the criteria that are to be fulfilled by an essay type question. There are certain criteria that an essay type question should meet. What are those criteria? Let us see in detail. The first criteria, of course, is that it requires the respondent to create the answer rather than simply selecting the correct answer. Rather than selecting a response which is already given to the respondent here has to create an answer. That is the first criteria. The question should be created in such a way that it requires the respondent to create an answer for the question asked. The second criteria is that the essay type question should elicit students to respond to the question and also interlink the sentences and also interlined sentences. So the students should be able to create an answer and the students should also be able to interlink all the sentences or all the contents that has been taught to the students. The next criteria is that they require subjective judgment by a skilled person, by a person who has enough knowledge, by a competent person. So in order to judge a response, as we have seen in the introduction as well as in the definition, the judgment of the response of the essay type question is difficult, but there is not a single correct answer that has been listed out as a correct answer, right? So there can be different ways, there can be different patterns of answering the same question. So in order to make sure that there is quality judgment of what is written by every different student, we need a skilled person, a person who's competent enough in order to judge what is written by the students. Another criteria is that essay type question is different from other forms of assessment or other types of question because it requires the students to have in-depth thinking or have a more systematic thinking. So students, in order to compose the answer, in order to write an entire essay about a particular topic that is being asked, students have to recall, they need to have an in-depth thinking. So another criteria is that it is different from other forms of assessment because it requires the respondent to have in-depth and more systematic thinking. Let us now see the features of essay type question. The first feature is that essay type question requires great deal of thought and planning. So in order to construct an essay type question as well as in order to respond to an essay type question, it requires great deal of thought and planning. The second feature is that the second feature is that the students prepare their own answers, right? So as we know, in essay type questions, the students are supposed that it is required the students are supposed to create an answer. So students are supposed to create their own answers or prepare their own answers. Another very important feature is that essay type questions are used only for evaluation of knowledge. So in order to evaluate knowledge, essay type questions can be used as an evaluation tool. Knowledge area alone can be assessed. Of course, when we write the essay type question, the handwriting, the neatness, the way the content is organized, as well as the spelling of the students also plays a major factor for scoring the mark in essay type question. So this is also one of the feature of essay type question. Another very important and what we have discussed earlier, no single answer or no single response can be considered as a correct response. Now, as we have seen and discussed, different students will have different way of responding. They have different thought process. They have different ways of expressing their ideas. So no single response can be considered as a correct response, unlike in multiple choice questions or match the following questions. Another important feature is the examinee or the student is given the freedom of expression or freedom of response. So as an examinee or as a respondent, I have the freedom to write my answers. I have the freedom to create my response. These are the various features of essay type questions. Let us now see the purposes of essay type questions. Essay type questions can have subjective bias by the evaluators. Many educationalists criticize essay type questions, yet in India we use essay type questions in schools, in colleges and university. In nursing profession especially, essay type questions are used vastly in order to assess the knowledge of the student. Now, of course, we might all wonder if there are so many loopholes, if there are so many disadvantages, and if educationalists are criticizing essay type questions, why is it used for evaluation in nursing education, right? This is because essay type questions serves distinct purposes which cannot be served by any other assessment tool. As I said in the introduction as well, essay type question has various disadvantages, but it has few advantages and few merits for which the essay type questions are used, because it serves certain purposes which we are going to discuss now. The very first purpose for why essay type questions are used is that the students get a chance to express their point of view. Whenever a particular phenomena is asked to the students, here through essay type questions, the students are getting the freedom, the students are getting the rights to express what views they have on the particular phenomena, whereas other forms of assessment does not give that freedom to the students. The next purpose is to assess the factual recall of the knowledge. Now, sometimes the teacher just want to evaluate how well the students can recall what is being taught to them or what was taught to them. In order to find out how well the student can recall what was taught in the class or what was understood by the student, only essay type questions can be used. Any other form of assessment questions will not allow the teacher to understand the recalling ability of the students. The third purpose is analyzing and explanation of relationships. So when a teacher wants to know how well a student is able to connect two different concepts, or how well does a student explains the relationship between two different concepts, essay type questions can be used in order to assess their ability to connect or to explain the relationship between two different concepts. Whereas in any other form of assessment, again, it is not possible to assess the ability of the students to explain a relationship between two different phenomena or two different concepts. Another important purpose of essay type question is assessment of non-content related attributes of the student. So as we have discussed, in essay type question, the students have to write down the answer, they have to present the answer, they have to organize the answer in the answer sheet. So through essay type question, the teacher not only assesses the content knowledge of the student, but other attributes such as the creativity of the student, the neatness, the handwriting, the ability to organize the entire content, and the ability to present the content can also be analyzed by the teacher with the help of essay type questions. These are the various purposes of essay type questions, and these are the reasons why essay type questions cannot be replaced by another form of assessment, another evaluation tool. Let us now see the principles for construction of essay type questions. In order to evaluate the student, essay type questions must be prepared according to all the criteria that we have discussed in the last sessions. Let us see what are those criteria, what are those principles that are to be followed while constructing an essay type question. The first one is the learning objective, which is to be evaluated by the essay type question, must be clearly defined in simple words. So we have already seen the use of simple words, how important it is to use simple words for the respondent to have a better understanding. We have discussed this in criteria. So in the very first principle, we have to make sure that the learning objective, which is to be evaluated by an essay type question, must be in simple words, should be clearly defined in simple words. That is the first principle that is to be followed while constructing an essay type question. Another important principle is that if the learning objectives can be assessed by any other form of assessment, any other type of assessment, then use of essay type questions must be avoided. If we can assess the knowledge of the student with other forms such as fill in the blanks, true or false, multiple choice question, or even short answers, use of essay type question must be avoided. So it is always better to use several short answers rather than using a long essay type question. Rather than using one long essay type question, several short questions can be asked for the respondent, can be constructed for the respondent. So the question or the task that the respondent has to do or the respondent has to perform has to be clearly defined, as I said in the very first principle. So how can a person who's constructing the essay type question clearly define the question or the task that the respondent has to do? The first thing is to clearly write down the question or clearly define the question so that the students understand what is being asked. For any respondent to give a correct response or to formulate a correct answer, they need to understand the question properly. The first thing to do is to clearly define the question, whether it is in the written form or in the oral form, so that the students are clear and so that the students understand what is being asked. The next one is the appropriate time limit and the word limit for each of the essay type question must be given to the students. So the students must know how much to write and what is the time duration that is allotted for each of the question which is being asked. So as an evaluator, the evaluator while constructing the essay type question must give an approximate time to spend on each of the question as well as the limit of the words to be used for each of the question asked. The distribution of marks also must be explained to the students. Distribution of marks for the neatness, for organization, for their presentation, as well as for the answer or for the content. So distribution of marks for each segment of the question must be clearly defined to the students. The next principle is to avoid the use of complex and ambiguous words. So we should not use complex and ambiguous words. This was one of the criteria that we discussed in our earlier class, right? So the words that we used must be simple for the respondent to understand. Another important principle to keep on mind while constructing the essay type question is that questions that has too broad scope and that can bring confusion as well as that allows the respondent to write wide scope of content must be avoided. So as an evaluator, we have to ask questions to the students which require specific form of answer. As in essay type question, there's no one proper correct response, but the question should be as such that it does not have too broad scope for the students to write anything that they want. Another important principle is to use simple words that can be understandable for all the students. So words which are understood by all the students, by all the respondents must be used. Another important principle is that a reasonable question should be constructed for the students so that they don't feel that it is out of their ability or out of their scope to answer. The question that is asked should be practical for the students to answer. Another principle is that the questions of essay type can be written either in declarative or interrogative statements. Another important principle, as I said, the marks that is divided or distributed throughout the essay type question must be clearly explained, as well as the approximate time limit that is given to the students also must be clearly defined. The criteria for grading the answer must also be included so that the students get an idea about what to write and how to write. The use of optional questions which can confuse the students and also make evaluation difficult must be avoided. So using optional questions must be avoided. And finally, the essay type questions should be improved through preview and review. So there are a few things an evaluator must do before it is administered or before it is used as an evaluation tool. The first thing, the evaluator can predict the response of the respondent or the student. So the first thing is to predict the response. And the second thing is to write a model answer. So as an evaluator, the evaluator has to review and preview the questions that has been created and also predict the answer of the respondent and write a model answer for the question asked. Another important principle, the constructor must also make sure that it assesses the critical thinking of the students. Another important principle to keep on mind is that the essay type questions should also evaluate the thinking and reasoning of the students along with the knowledge. Essay type questions should also provide opportunity to assess the problem solving skills and decision making skills among the students. It should also provide an opportunity for creative expression as well as organization of the facts. So as we've seen in essay type question, the students get the opportunity to create their own response as well as organize the entire content. So it should provide the opportunity to the students to create, to compose the response as well as organize the facts. Now essay type questions are relatively easy to construct, but it requires a skilled person or a knowledgeable person to construct those questions. All these principles are also the advantages of an essay type question. All the principle that we have discussed says that it must give the opportunity for the students to show their critical thinking, decision making, problem solving, as well as it provides the opportunity for expression of facts and organizing the content. These are also the advantages of essay type questions. Let us now see the disadvantages of essay type questions. The first disadvantage is that essay type question can lead to ambiguous answer. It can lead to answer which is not related to the question asked if the question asked is not clearly defined or if the question asked is not in simple words. So when it is not asked in a simple word, the respondents might not understand what is being asked and the respondent may answer to the question very vaguely. Another disadvantage of an essay type question is that they only assess limited area of knowledge from the entire curriculum. So of course, essay type question cannot be asked for all the content covered by the curriculum. Only few topics can be chosen and given as an essay type questions. Another disadvantage is that it is of course difficult and time consuming to grade the essay type answers. Another disadvantage of an essay type question is that evaluation is subjective, which means different teacher may have different way of understanding the answer or different way of even grading the answer. So different teachers may mark the same answer in a different way. Essay type question also provides a lot of scope for subjective bias. This we have discussed in the criteria as well. Essay type question lacks objectivity. The evaluators may demonstrate subjective bias. To summarize, today we have discussed about essay type questions, under which we have discussed what are essay type questions, what are the different definitions of essay type questions, what are the various features of essay type questions, what are the various purposes, and finally the principle as well as the advantages and disadvantages of essay type questions. I hope the class was helpful. I'll see you all in the next session where we will discuss about short answer questions. Thank you and have a great day ahead.